Hey everybody, this is Julian Mack. I'm here with Kristen Robideaux with Planned Parenthood advocates, overall great activists, somebody who I've worked with in the past. We're here today to talk about a very serious subject, reproductive rights. And so I just wanted to start off with something that's been in the news and on my news feed a lot. The abortion bans throughout the country, including in Ohio. It seems like Ohio led the way with that this year. Can you talk, is this a coordinated effort? Can you talk about what's going on with that?
Absolutely.
Nationally and locally.
Yeah, so as you've kind of said, it does seem like nationally our country is kind of in this like race to see who's the biggest like dumpster fire currently, as far as passing this version of the 6-week ban or just absolutely like outlawing abortion outright. So this is definitely intentional, and while it may not seem that way, that it's like actually a coordinated effort, it is really big for the anti-choice movement. Also, just a heads up, I'm not going to refer to pro-life groups as pro-life, because if they were pro-life, they wouldn't care so much about getting rid of a safe medical procedure, and they would care about things like funding welfare, stopping the school-to-prison pipeline, ending police brutality, like stuff like that. So I'm going to refer to them exclusively as anti-choice, because that's ultimately like their goal. So anti-choice groups around the nation are kind of in this race to see who can get their most extreme version of outlawing abortion up to the federal Supreme Court. Because now that, as we all know, Brett Kavanaugh is sitting on the Supreme Court, and he already has had some anti-choice rulings, like in his tenure as a judge when he was doing the Texas District Court before. And so they're trying to overturn Roe v. Wade, ultimately, to make all abortion illegal, outlaw all safe abortion. So that's the goal here, and while it doesn't seem like it's this like community effort, it totally is, because whatever anti-choice state gets this extremist like law to their extremist law to overturn Roe v. Wade, it's going to be like a big moment of glory for them, essentially, because they will be the state who like outlawed it for like our whole nation. So, yeah.
Now you brought up an interesting, something that I've heard since I've been in activist circles and been around other reproductive rights activists. But before that happened, I wasn't aware of. You said keep abortion safe and legal.
Yeah.
So some people, can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great organizations that already have statistics on how getting rid of abortion or making abortion illegal doesn't actually change abortion rates whatsoever. It just makes abortion really deadly because it's not being performed in a sterile environment. It's not being done by people who are familiar with reproductive anatomy, who aren't familiar with how like uteruses work. And also people will go to extreme measures because abortion stigma is rooted in all sorts of sexual health and reproductive health stigma. It starts with like the fact that like people who menstruate can't talk about like their periods without being shamed, or like we see people who are menstruating as like dirty, and like in some countries there's still practices where like people are excluded during from like communities while they're menstruating. It's things like calling people who are trying to access birth control or contraceptives like sluts and whores and stuff like that. Like it's all rooted in the same stigma and shaming and controlling of like people's sexual lives. So, oh my gosh, what was your original question? I got on my tangent.
It was that's what I wanted. No, it was just about keeping abortion safe and legal. But
Yes.
but yeah, you brought up, I mean, so many good points with that. With just the right. It's the right to a safe and legal abortion.
Yes. So the reason I went on that tangent, thank you for reminding me, because there's so much. It's also like interconnected and involved with each other, because there's so much stigma, shame, ignorance, specific and intentional miseducation. The way that like culturally we are taught sex ed and like about our bodies, people can't access the information already, and the harder that it gets to access medical information about how our bodies work specifically when it does come to pregnancy and like any sort of like unplanned pregnancy, people they're going to die because they will use extreme methods to try to get rid of the pregnancy due to that stigma and shame. Because like if abortion's illegal and we're shaming everyone who's like trying to do something about it, like if you find out you're pregnant and you're in like a very like harsh stigmatized area, you won't have anyone to reach out to because like it's a life or death situation. Like it's just I mean it's similar but obviously not 100% the same as like coming to terms with like your sexual identity, but like it's kind of almost the same situation where like coming to terms with the fact that like if you identify as like gay or like anything that's not like cis straight, you risk losing your home, you risk losing your job. If you're in school, like you could be at risk of like physical violence from like your peers. Well, any sort of community space, like you're at risk for not being like with the majority group. So like that's always a thing. And also here in my own experience, I do volunteer patient escorting at Capitol Care as well. I've been doing that for 2.5 years, and I've had patients talk to me here in Toledo who tell me that they've used methods such as pouring like soda in their vagina, pouring bleach in their vagina, swallowing bleach, trying to expel a pregnancy that they cannot have for their own safety or just because they're not willing to be a parent and they're in a big, very dire situation. So like people are already doing those things, and it's just gonna get more extreme. So it's important that instead of shaming people, we grant them access to safe spaces where they can not have to worry about any of those extra or added health risks, and also that way they can be connected to resources to make sure they're never in that situation again as well.
Now, one question I like to ask everybody is about the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. In your work with, in your reproductive rights work, how do you or do the organizations you work for or are involved in, how do they exemplify the golden rule?
Oh, I love this question. So for those of you who don't know me as well as like you know me, this isn't my first like official like organizing job, and I can say that Planned Parenthood and the coalition that we're part of is truly the only political work that I've ever done that actually puts their money where their mouth is. And I mean that by like, it's not just talking about like having an inclusive organization and like being diverse and like listening to like people of color, listening to queer people, and like we have people in all sorts of like admin and like HQ roles. Like Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio's CEO is Iris Harvey. She's a wonderful like Black woman, and so like we make sure that like people are in all areas from like all walks of life. So I'm super excited about that. But also because like Planned Parenthood does have a super problematic history, and like that we were founded by Margaret Sanger, who was very aligned with like eugenicists and stuff like that. I am super proud for the fact that like we own that and we actively work to fix stuff like that. Because like you can't make progress if you like are denying like who you are, who you were. And also like other partners that we work with on the regular, URGE, which is Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity, NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio, Women Have Options Ohio, which is Ohio's abortion fund. So if you're looking to throw some money to help protect abortion access, donate to them. There's New Voices out in Cleveland, which is specifically RJ focused. Like we work with so many groups that not only care about access to abortion, but they care about reproductive justice, which is ensuring safety of both the parent and the child if they choose to carry the pregnancy to term and like actually like be a parent. Right. But it guarantees the child's safety all the way up until they turn into an adult. And other things like just because you have access to abortion doesn't mean you're safe being a pregnant person. So like Ohio has a terrible like infant mortality rate compared to like a lot of other states. We're in the bottom.
And that's specifically really bad within Black community.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's some really great initiatives going on in Cleveland right now because like Cuyahoga County, where there's a large population of like women of color, like has some of the highest rates in our state. And so like our Planned Parenthood out there has like the Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies initiative to like help connect people to resources to combat some of that. But also like we look to establish organizations like Sister Song, who is the creator and like the founder and the leader of the movement of reproductive justice. So they hold us accountable on making sure that things like, again, like if you're a person of color and you're pregnant, if you're facing threats like police brutality, like in your everyday life, like that doesn't mean that you're safe, because that's a risk that you have to live with, and you're always at risk of like being jeopardized, like physically, mentally, and like that's a high risk when you're pregnant to take. Like mental and physical health is so important when you're pregnant. So I'm super appreciative to work for a place that is considering all of the things, and like that we have so many great community partners to hold us accountable, like when we're failing as well. Like I can't say enough good things about like the reproductive like rights movement right now.
And what's one thing that you think people have a common misconception of that you want them to know?
Oh man,
Just one.
I know. It's so hard. It's so hard. Well, I'm gonna say right now, on social media, there's a lot of really good conversations being started to help break abortion stigma specifically. So like, abortion is very important to Planned Parenthood, but obviously it's not everything that we do, because like, it's important to make sure that everyone's getting like general like healthcare checkups and all that. So I would say for the folks who are out there living their life, like I'm not pro-abortion, I'm not even pro-choice, and their thinking is, I would never myself have an abortion, but that does but I think other people should have that choice. That actually means you're pro-choice. That's it. The anti-choice movement has done a lot of emotional manipulation the last few decades with like language and like confusing people with how abortion works and like what it actually is. So abortion is an elective but sometimes medically necessary healthcare procedure. Everyone should have that option. If you're not cool with saying you're pro-abortion, that's cool, but if it's just that you would never have an abortion but you think other people should have that right, please stop calling yourself not pro-choice, because it's actually really, it's really harmful. So, yeah, and there's no shame. There's no shame in abortions. Abortions aren't tragic, and they're not always hard. So for some people, it'll be the easiest decision of their life. Some people don't even like cramp or bleed, which is bad. And some people, they need several days to recover. So like, that's my answer. Is like there's no shame in that.
No shame.
Yeah.
No shame. All right. Well, thank you for all the work you do. Please continue to do the work you do. As you know, people need to keep pushing back and being part of the resistance.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah.